Posakete anthropoi. My name is Dr. David Sinoe, and I would like to teach you a little Greek lesson, something that I have learned, which I think you will find very helpful in your study and appreciation of this important language. The lesson comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14, verse 38. The setting is that Jesus has taken Peter, James, and John to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he has gone apart from them to pray in his moments of agony before his crucifixion. He's given them instructions to watch and pray with him. He comes back and he finds them sleeping, and he says words to this effect. He says, "Simon, couldn't you just watch with me 1 hour?" And then he says, and here I'm going to read the Greek, he says, "Tomen pneuma prothumon he de sarx asthenes." Tomen pneuma he de sarx. The spirit is willing, prothumon, but the flesh, he de sarx, is weak, asthenes. Now, we're going to look at the men and de correlative particles a little bit later in this brief lesson, but now I want to just bring to your attention a couple of different translations so that you can see how the translators have taken this important verse. First is the ESV, which says, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." I think that indeed is trying to capture the meaning of the particle men. That would be my guess on that. The Message by the late Eugene Peterson is not really a translation, it's more of a paraphrase. It may have its charms, but as you will see, it's quite free. He says, "Part of you is eager, ready for anything in God." I guess that would be the ta men pneuma prothumon. But another part is as lazy as an old dog sleeping by the fire. That's very creative, but of course, no sense of those words or meaning is really in that verse. And then we have the New King James Version. That's going to be the third translation that you're going to see up here. And that says, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Now, in each instance, you'll see that the word is in italics. And I think that the reason is there is no verb in the Greek in this verse. There's no esti like we might expect. So the translators are trying to tell you that they have inserted this English word. Now, I might want to point out to them that all of the English words have been inserted into the translation. But I think their motive is to be as accurate and as close to the text as possible, and I think that's a laudable motive, no doubt. Finally, I want to share with you Theodore Beza's translation into Latin from his 1598 comments or annotationes on the New Testament. And he says, "Spiritus quidem promptus est, sed carro infirma." Spiritus quidem promptus est. The spirit is in fact willing. I think that's the quidem, is trying to get that men. Sed carro infirma, but the flesh is weak. Now this raises an interesting question, doesn't it? How are translators and students of Greek, how are they supposed to get into the target language, these particles? You may know that particles have no real meaning themselves. What they do is they add flavor and nuance to the words with which you find them. I kind of compare this typically when I'm teaching this to students to the way that you might use spices in cooking. Nobody's going to sit down and eat a bowl of cinnamon, hopefully, or a tablespoon of nutmeg or thyme or coriander. But if you put the right amount of these seasonings or spices in your cooking, they make the rest of the meal pungent. They flavor and nuance the aromas and the deliciousness of the dish. Particles are just like that. No real meaning in themselves, but they change the meaning of the words with which they pattern. So we're going to look at Smythe, a Greek grammar, one of my favorite grammars, the favorite grammar, section 2904, where he says, "Men de" serves to mark stronger or weaker contrasts of various kinds. Stronger or weaker contrasts of various kinds. Now, in this one, Mark 14:38, this is a strong contrast that Christ is marking. Tada pneuma, the spirit is willing, prothumon. Peter wants to watch and pray, he de sarx asthenes, but the flesh is so weak it can't follow through. So Smythe says, stronger or weaker contrasts of various kinds, and this is the important part, and is sometimes to be rendered by on the one hand, on the other hand, or indeed, but is often to be left untranslated. I would suggest that in English, if translating into English, it's probably best to leave men and de untranslated, because there's really no way to get that sense into English, because English typically doesn't have expressive particles like that. You saw Beza use quidem because quidem is pretty close to a particle in Latin which conveys that asseverative or asseverative, affirmative kind of meaning. So here it is best, I would say, to leave the men and the de untranslated. And if you are a teacher or a preacher, you can then, with your knowledge of Greek, you can explain the significance of this contrast between pneuma and sarx, between spirit and flesh, to your students or to your congregation. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, and if you would like to learn more Greek, then please check out my course at MossMethod.com. I've developed a way for you to go from neophyte to erudite. That is, to start out with hardly any knowledge of the language or even none whatsoever, and get to a very high level of expertise so that you can read Plato and Aristotle, you can read Homer and Demosthenes, you can read the New Testament with ease and comfort. When I started learning Greek 26 years ago, I knew nothing whatsoever. And now, after years of labor and many wonderful teachers and God's blessing, I'm able to read these languages with a great deal of ease and enjoyment, and you can do that too. So please go to MossMethod.com, check out some of my other free instruction, and consider coming along with me. I'll be your psychopompos, your soul guide into learning the Greek language. Thank you very much.